Welcome to week 17 of our SAT vocabulary study. Please note that there will be a homework assignment at the end of the video. I am introducing a new grammatical concept, new to most of you. For those of you who take Spanish, it may sound familiar. So make sure that when you're done scrolling through the 5 words and the photographs that accompany them with my sentences, that you continue on. You may want to take notes on the opposite side of your ILJ where you're putting the vocabulary notes on verbals and, in this particular case this week, infinitives. You will be responsible for understanding what a verbal is and knowing specifically what an infinitive is and being able to recognize them and, of course, write them. So that will be at the very end of the video. This week, all of our words are verbs. Our first word is vacillate. And when you vacillate about something, you are often unable to make up your mind, and thus you are indecisive. You can change your mind, you can waver from one decision to the other, or you can hesitate to make a decision, often because you have trouble making up your mind. Notice that because this is a verb, you can add an ed-ing or an s to change the tense, and a noun would be vacillation. I imagine that once you think of this definition, you can probably think of a lot of things that you have vacillated on over the course of your life, maybe even in particular over the last week. Here's a picture of some Grater's ice cream, and when I visit Grater's, I stand at the counter, and I don't go very often because it's so expensive. But anyway, I stand at the counter for a long time as I vacillate between my two favorite flavors, mint chocolate chip and raspberry chip. So that food is often something we vacillate on, especially when we go to a restaurant and we have a menu with all kinds of yummy things and we don't know what to get. Our next word is perplex, and it simply means to confuse. You can be perplexed or you could perplex someone else. And notice again, you can change the ending to suit the tense that you're using in a sentence. An adverb would be perplexingly, adding the ly at the end. Here's little Gordy, and Gordy's teacher was perplexed by his bad behavior and refusal to do homework because he was such a good student the year before. He looks very ornery, and his behavior obviously confused her. Our next word is mimic, and when you mimic something, you imitate it or you try to copy it, and generally that is speech and or actions. You observe how someone speaks and you try to replicate that as best possible, as closely as possible, or you might mimic their actions. Now, of course, mimicking can be a good thing and a bad thing. When you're trying to learn from someone, mimicking might be an excellent thing. If you're a basketball player and you're trying to mimic the moves of some particular player that you like or that you like to emulate, that might be a good thing. When you mimic someone to make fun of them, that is a bad thing. Here is Frank Caliendo, and if you don't know who Frank Caliendo is, he's pretty funny and he is really good. A comedian, and his specialty is to mimic quite a few famous people. Here are two of them, and I love it when Frank Caliendo mimics George W. Bush and John Madden. He sounds just like them, and he even changes his looks to look like them. If you haven't seen Frank Caliendo, and a lot of people of you who watch sports might because he specializes in sports, you need to check him out on YouTube. He's pretty funny. Next is admonish, and when you admonish someone, you might caution them against doing something that's not something they should be doing. You might advise them about not doing that thing or counsel them against doing something. It could also mean just simply to scold. Let's say you smart off to a teacher. He or she may admonish you for doing that because it's the wrong thing to do. It's very similar to another word we had earlier this year, chide. And the noun version or the noun form is admonishment. So if someone admonishes you, you have received an admonishment. Here's little Miranda, and her strict English nanny admonished her for sneaking cookies before dinner. Our final word is relish, and this is not the stuff that you put on hot dogs at the baseball game. When you relish something, you take great pleasure in it, you enjoy it. Very similar to revel, not exactly alike, but there's a connection there. So you relish things that you enjoy doing. You relish certain foods because you enjoy them. And of course, I couldn't ignore the food aspect of relishing. I relish delicious chicken burritos from Chipotle. I eat them slowly and savor every yummy bite, and I'm very full afterwards, but they are the best. So those are our 5 words, and next comes the homework, so don't go away. So you've taken your notes, and they are on the right side of your ILJ, page 35 if I remember correctly. You might want to take some notes on page 34 and then write the sentences after you take the notes. All right, here we go. So this week we are going to work on one of our Common Core standards for language. And that standard is L81. You don't have to know that. But one of the standards for 8th grade language, English language, is to demonstrate a command of conventions. And one of the conventions of the English language is to understand and explain the function of verbals. And there are 3 kinds of verbals. They are gerunds, participles, and infinitives. And we're going to focus on infinitives this week. We will look at how they function in very general and as simplistic as terms as possible, and how they function in sentences, and then you are going to use them in sentences. Okay, so stick with me here. So first of all, what is a verbal? Well, you know that all of our words this week are verbs. A verbal is a noun or an adjective that is formed from a verb. So all of our verbs this week could be turned into nouns or adjectives and thus verbals. There are, and actually it could be an adverb as well. There are 3 kinds of verbals, as I mentioned before. A participle, and that's a verbal that acts as an adjective. A gerund acts as a noun, and an infinitive can act as a noun, adjective, or adverb. And we are going to focus on infinitives this week. Let me show you an example of each one of these kinds of verbals. The first example here, participle, catch a falling star. Now if you remember, the participle, going back, acts as an adjective. So in this particular sentence, the word falling is acting as an adjective. It's a verbal, but it's pretending, if you will, in this sentence to be an adjective. Our next sentence, we have a gerund. Swimming the channel must be difficult. In this case, the gerund, the ing verbal, is acting as a noun. Finally, we have the infinitive, and she loves to swim. To swim is the infinitive. You'll almost always find the word to before the verb in the verbal infinitive. The problem or the complication with infinitives is that, again, as I mentioned before, they can act in several different ways. They can act as a noun, they can act as an adjective, and they can act as an adverb. All year long, I've been trying to get everyone to understand the importance of understanding the basic parts of speech. And this is one of the reasons why, is because as you progress through high school, and in particular when you take foreign languages, you really have to know this stuff in order to do well at that particular aspect of what you're studying. So I'm going to go back to a slide here with some examples of infinitives only, because that's all we're going to focus on this week. And we'll look to see how they function in each of these types of sentences. I'm sorry that the print is a little small, but I wanted to put these all on one page. So here's a sentence with an infinitive. To sleep is the only thing Eli wants after his double shift waiting tables at the neighborhood cafe. Now remember, I told you that an infinitive usually, almost always, gets a to, the word to in front of it. So to sleep is the infinitive, and here it's acting as a noun. And we know that because it is a subject of the sentence, and nouns are what act as subjects of sentences. Okay, so in this particular case, the infinitive is acting as a noun. This verbal is acting as a noun. It's pretending to be the noun of the sentence, and it's succeeding at that. All right, the second example here. No matter how fascinating the biology dissection is, Emmanuel turns his head and refuses to look. To look is the verbal. It is an infinitive kind of verbal. And in this particular case, it is also acting as a noun because it is the object, or it's what's being impacted by the verb. And the verb here is refuses. Okay? Next sentence example, whenever Melissa goes, or wherever Melissa goes, she always brings a book to read in case conversation lags or she has a long wait. And in this particular circumstance, the infinitive to read is functioning as an adjective because it's modifying book. It's giving you more information about that noun. Okay, that horrendous noise, if you heard it, was a walkie-talkie from the zoo that someone forgot to turn off. Okay, anyway, so in this particular circumstance, to read is the infinitive, and because it gives us more information or modifies a noun, it is acting as an adjective in this sentence. Finally, the last sentence, Richard braved the icy rain to throw the smelly squid eyeball stew into the apartment dumpster. That's a very vivid sentence, by the way. And in this particular sentence, to throw is the infinitive, so it's the verbal of the sentence, and it is functioning in this case as an adverb because it's explaining why he did this action. So it's giving us more information about an action, a verb. And I know that that sounds extremely complicated, and I'm not going to hold you to the fire to know all of these nuances of the infinitives, but it's something that you're going to have to start learning, and now is the time. So this is just an introduction, and it might be a really good idea for you to jot some notes down and a few examples so that you have this to refer to at a later time. Make sure in your ILJ table of contents that you put, vocabulary sentences and infinitive notes. And this way you've got the necessary information and you know where to find it. Now, this is our homework. Your assignment this week is to create 5 vivid sentences, one for each of the vocabulary words, of course, and each sentence should use the word as part of an infinitive: to relish, to vacillate, etc. Use the slide before this one in order to try to determine whether the infinitive is acting as a noun or an adjective or an adverb. And mark that. You might want to just label it acting as an adjective. Don't worry if you get that part of it wrong. I want to see if you can try to figure it out on your own And then perhaps what we'll do on Friday, if time permits, is you'll swap your book with someone, and with a little cheat sheet of some kind, we'll try to sift through the sentences that you created and figure this out. But the basics of what I want you to do is to make sure that you create sentences using these verbs as verbals, and the specific type of verbal I want you to use is an infinitive. So remember, you'll have the word to in front of each of these words. So there you have it, this week's verbs and your homework assignment. Please make sure that they are vivid sentences with lots of description in them, and obviously you're going to be writing them as infinitives. Good luck!